We've been going through and inventorying some of our yarns lately. We've even gone through and pulled out some WIPs that we are no longer in love with and had really hard conversations about letting those go. And I know that's been very overwhelming for many of us. I know it has for myself, and some of us may still be in those steps. But today we're going to talk about something that's going to tie all that together. Because if we can't pick up one of the craziest skeins in our stash and see its potential, then it's just going to wind up sitting on the shelf longer, or it's just going to go in a box and be forgotten about. And that is not what this channel or this Stash Down series is about. We are focusing on being intentional, and we're focusing on finding the love and joy we had when we first bought that skein of yarn and carrying that through to the end till it is a completed project that we are very proud of. So today we're going to stop the guesswork. We're going to stop second guessing ourselves over seeing a yarn and having no idea what to make with it. We're going to stop the second guessing ourselves when we get halfway through a project and we think, what was I thinking starting this? And we're going to stop second guessing ourselves at looking at the yarns in our stash and thinking, I have nothing that I can use to make what I want to make. I'm going to walk you through the exact process that I use when I take a skein of yarn and I try to pair it with the perfect pattern. Or if you are the opposite side and you have that perfect pattern that you want to find a skein of yarn in your stash to use with it, we're going to talk about that also. We don't want to look at our yarns and think, what can I make with that? We want to look at them and we want to see their potential. And we want to think, what is really going to work with that yarn? And what can I actually finish that I'm going to love when I'm done? Because this is not just yarn. This is time that you've invested. These are money that you've invested. These are outlets of creativity. And more important, they have potential. Once we figure out how to see that potential, the things are going to change for us and we're going to be inspired to create with them. Now, I am going to say that you may want to save this video because it is going to be packed full of information. We're going to cover topics like yarn weights, fiber behavior, drape versus structure, how to calculate yardage, how to substitute yarn confidently, how to choose the right pattern or the right yarn if you already have the pattern, and how to avoid mistakes that make us want to abandon the project halfway through and end up with all those WIPs once again. So grab your yarn, grab some coffee, maybe even a notebook and a pen. However, I do want to say that in the video description, there is going to be a printable for you because I love printables. I love having cheat sheets of information, and I created one just for you that you can print off, have at your fingertips. And so as you do this, and I'm not sitting here with you, you can glance over that and be reminded of these things to help you make a project that you're going to be successful in. But also, you can save that video and have me in your little creating space with you at any time you want. So before we start pairing up our yarns with anything, we need to kind of talk about the different weights of yarn because some of these things are not like the others. And if we get this step wrong, then that can lead to total disaster in our projects and make us very, very unhappy as crafters. So here in the US, we use a standard yarn weight system, which runs from 0 to 7. But here's the thing, it can get very, very confusing if you are someone from a different country or if you're looking at a yarn label from a different country. Because not all country labels are the same, and of course, no one uses the exact same language as everyone else. So you may see things like 4-ply, or 8-ply, or DK, or double knitting, or Aran, or worsted, and those don't always mean the same things as we think they do. Plies do not always mean thickness. Originally, it was used to describe how many strands are plied together to create that yarn. So a 4-ply in one country doesn't necessarily mean it's thicker than another yarn. It's more like a naming system that happened to line up with certain weights over time. So the US yarn system starts off with a 0 yarn, which is lace. It's a very fine, delicate yarn that is about 30 wraps per inch, and this is often called cobweb, shawl, or heirloom type yarn. This yarn just so happens to be Cherry Hill or Cherry Tree Hill Farm, and this is their lace weight, and the colorway is called Tangerine Tree. I don't even think this company's in business anymore, but this has been one of my favorite yarns because it's one of the first really nice yarns that I ever bought myself. Look at all those colors. After lace weight, we have number 1, which is fingering weight yarn, also called 4-ply in the UK and AU. This is lightweight, it has a very high drape, and this weight yarn is perfect for shawls, socks, hats, garments, you name it. It is a workhorse yarn. This one just so happens to be Desert Vista Dye Works. It is a self-striping yarn, and it is called Rainbows of the World, and it is one of my favorite colorways. Next up, we have number 2 weight yarn, or sport weight yarn, and sometimes even called a 5-ply. This is slightly thicker than your fingering weight yarns. It's still great for garments, and it just has a little bit more structure. And this is some Stonehenge mill crazy yarn, and it's basically just the mill ends of their yarn that they get together to make this amazing yarn. Next we have a number 3, and that is called DK, often called double knitting or 8-ply yarn. This is your Goldilocks yarn, sometimes referred to even as baby yarn. It's not too thick, it's not too thin, but it's just right. It's great for sweaters, accessories, and pretty much everything in between. This just so happens to be a Miss Babs, and it's off her Yalza base. So it's a huge helping of 560 yards of a DK weight yarn. And this is in a colorway called Merida, but it was a Wild Iris, so it's a non-repeatable colorway. I love Babs yarn. Then we have what we here in the US call a number 4 yarn, also called worsted weight yarn, sometimes called Aran weight yarn, and is referred to a 10-ply in some regions. If you bought acrylic yarn in the US from Hobby Lobby or Michaels, then you've probably picked up a number 4 weight yarn. That's where all your Red Heart Super Savers, all your I Love This yarn. It's just a basic go-to yarn that the majority of all of us have used at some point in our life. It can often be said that it's kind of like your t-shirt and jeans yarn. It's just good for everyday practical wear and tear, and it's just so versatile that you can make anything from it. This one just so happens to be a hand-dyed from Knits for Comfort. It is the Fire colorway, and it is so pretty. And you're going to be seeing this yarn again because we're going to talk about it as another example. After worsted weight, we have number 5, which is bulky weight. So bulky weight is sometimes called a 12-ply yarn. It's thick, it's cozy, think fast projects. This is fun to use for all sorts of things as well. This one just so happens to be Lamb's Pride bulky. It is a super great yarn if you want to felt things, and this brand and this one tends to be the go-to for making house slippers. I love this colorway. It's one of the older ones. It's called Golden Mushroom, but yeah, it's so pretty. Next up, we have a number 6, which is super bulky, and a number 7, which is jumbo. Both of these are big stitches, big tools, and really instant gratification. We're talking like you need a quick project, these are your go-to. So when we see something like DK or double knitting or even Aran weight, because Aran can kind of fall into, like we said here in the United States, is a number 4 weight yarn, and sometimes it's a little bit heftier than that, so it's more of a in between the Aran weight number 4 or number 5 bulky. You have an idea what those terms mean. You no longer have to kind of worry or feel overwhelmed by them. You can look at your cheat sheet and think, okay, where is this going to fall in line into the number system? And then once you know that category, you can make those yarns work for you and find the pattern that's going to be perfect for them. So now that we understand yarn weights, we can really start to make smart, intentional decisions on patterns to pair with those yarns. And we can make the yarn work for us in the pattern and not against us, because nobody wants that. So what happens though if you look in your stash and you have yarns like this and there's no label? Because we all have them. And looking at this one, is you probably feel pretty confident thinking, oh, I know that's going to be a bulky weight. What about this guy? Are you going to be able to look at it and say, hey, I know that's a sport weight yarn? And then you can find a pattern for it. Or are you going to be like, I cannot remember if that's a sport weight, DK weight? And so we're going to talk about ways how you can solve that mystery. And it's actually very, very simple. You can go about doing this several different ways. You may have a WPI tool somewhere in your stash, and this is just a wraps per inch tool. And all it is like a piece of something that has a 1-inch margin on it. This one actually has a little cheat sheet built into it. And so you can use that to do that. But if you don't have one of those, don't stress. There's other ways. You can use a ruler and just look at 1-inch marking on the ruler, or you can even use a pencil. Mark 1 inch on a pencil with a marker and a measuring tape, and then wrap your yarn around that. There is a trick to this though, a little pro tip, so to speak. When you put your yarn on your tool, you want the yarns to touch. You don't want them to be too tight or too loose. Again, we're going to call this the Goldilocks rule. You want it just right. And you know you can hear that when I start saying about Goldilocks. And so then once they're laying next to each other, you can count them. On that printable that I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a section down there, a cheat sheet for you for your wraps per inch. So you can look at that sheet and it tells you that 6 through 9 is a bulky weight yarn. But that's a great little way to get you started on figuring out what that mystery yarn is. But what if you don't have a stash and you are someone who buys yarn when you need it? Then we want to be more intentional. And the yarns that we pick up, we need to be intentional in picking those up, because the fiber of that yarn is going to determine really its function and what it's best going to be suited for. So before we fall in love with a color or a yarn that we see at the store, we should ask ourselves, what does this project that I want to make need to do? And we're going to talk about a few of those common fibers that we see in our yarns. Cotton yarns are strong, they're very absorbent, they have zero bounce, and they're great for bags and dishcloths. But remember, cotton does not have memory. If you knit a sweater with 100% cotton, by lunchtime, that thing is probably going to grow 2 to 3 times. Let me share a little funny story about this. My mother-in-law was 100% born in Austria, complete Austrian woman. She grew up in Germany during World War II, and knitting and crochet was not a hobby to them. It was a way of life. And so pretty much all the sweaters, her socks, mittens, shawls, scarves, hats, they could not afford to go out and buy. They were in Austria during World War II. Money was very, very tight. And so what they would do is knit or crochet their garments that they needed to wear. And she had a big chance to go with her uncle to the beach somewhere in Austria. I don't remember what beach it was. And I remember her telling me that she got some cotton yarn and she was so excited she was going to crochet herself a bathing suit, a 2-piece swimsuit to wear to the beach. So she spent her time making this and it was super cute. She loved the color it was. She went down to her uncle's house and then beach day came. She put on her new 2-piece bikini and waded into the ocean. And she said she stood there mortified because her bathing suit got wet and it grew so much it started to fall off of her. So we're going to take a lesson from an elder in our life, Mamaw, and we're going to learn that crochet cotton, 100% cotton, is probably not going to be the best thing for some garments because we don't want to be revealing things that we shouldn't have. So next, let's talk about wool. The gold standard for garments, it seems. It has spring, it stays warm even if it's damp, and it's also known to kind of help whisk moisture off your body, and that's what gives it that really warmness about it. And a variety of wools can be so soft and cozy. But there's a word of caution that we have to talk about when it comes to wools, and that is superwash. Superwash is a chemical treatment that is applied to the wool, and that is what keeps it from shrinking up and felting when you go to launder your item. The problem is it also can act like a sponge when it has that chemical treatment applied to it. It can pull in moisture from the air and make your garment or whatever item it is feel a little bit heavy. I've heard several people say this, and I'm curious, has this ever happened to you from wearing a superwash sweater or something in a really damp climate? Okay, we're back. Somebody had to go have a little restroom break. Not saying who. Acrylic, durable and easy to care for, perfect for baby blankets, for garments, perfect for amigurumi. However, it does have a downside. It doesn't like to breathe. And just a little bit of a safety reminder, we never want to use acrylic with heat, like as pot holders, because it is a plastic and it will melt. Also, just a gentle reminder that since it is synthetic, some crafters like to consider its long-term effects on the environment opposed to a natural fiber that's going to break down. But I know that many people have skin irritabilities when it comes to wool, so I can see definitely both sides of that. Then we have silk or bamboo. They have amazing drape to them, but if you try to use bamboo or silk for something that's supposed to be stiff or have structure, then you are going to have a disaster because it's just going to go limp. And silk, oh yeah, she's a diva. She is all about the wrinkles. Now, we do have a secret weapon. All of us have this secret weapon. We all have access to it. And it comes by the way of our phone. This secret weapon is essential for helping us see contrast in yarns when we're trying to pair more than one color together for a project. Because when you hold them in your hand, they may look amazing. But when you start working on your project, it could be that one of them kind of goes missing and it makes you lose some of that detail of that project. And we don't want that. That's because of their values, lightness versus darkness. Look at this. In color, they look different. In black and white, they're almost exactly the same shade of gray. The goal is that you want distinct steps of gray for high contrast, so a pattern pops when you put those colors together. Now for another magic weapon that we have to really utilizing our stash is paying attention to the yardage that we have. Because I'm sure we've all played Yarn Chicken a time or two, and personally, I always like to win. So to ensure that we're always winning at Yarn Chicken, I highly suggest picking up a kitchen food scale. This one just so happens to come from my favorite store, Aldi. I promise you, I'm not affiliated with Aldi. I just really love their stuff. I think I paid around $7.99 for this one. It is super thin design, so it takes up like hardly any room anywhere. And I usually just have it standing up on a bookcase, so there's just really no room anywhere that it's taking up. And it is great because it goes all the way down to 0 grams. So I can actually weigh out 2 grams of yarn and it picks it up beautifully. So let's say that you made a shawl and you have 3 or 4 colors left over and you want to really focus on being intentional and using your yarn down to your last drop, like I like to do, and how I mentioned in that mini scraps chaos video like this, the process where my yarn goes on a journey, and you want to implement something like that in your own crafting life, then this is where that scale is going to be, and the equation is going to be vital for that process. So you take your current weight, so whatever you have left over from making that shawl, and you take that current weight and you multiply it times the original yardage. You get that answer and then you divide that by the original yardage. And don't worry, that equation is also on the printable that I have for you down below. But that is going to give you your current grams, and it's also going to give you your current yardage. So that way, when you're getting ready to pair it for the next project in its journey, you know exactly where you're standing and there's no yarn chicken. I love this method because I love making shawls and doing color work. And that way, when I look at a project and it lists the yarns that I'm going to need and how many grams or yards of each color, I can pull from my just leftovers that could have got donated or tossed, and I can use those to make something amazing. We need to talk about something else that's very vital for pairing yarns to patterns, and that is yarn substitution. Because often, and I would say probably many times more than not, we find patterns that we want to make, but the designer uses yarn that we don't have or that maybe we've never even heard of because it's from a different country. And so that is where yarn substitution is going to be your superhero in winning that battle. There's several ways we can do this. You want to always look at the fiber and see what the fiber makeup is of the yarn that that pattern designer used. And another great way is yarnsub.com. Another vital resource you should have as a knitter or crocheter. And on yarnsub.com, you type in the yarn that the designer used, and this almost always works. There's always going to be the one-off where it doesn't work, and unfortunately, that's just where you're going to have to really pay attention to the fiber of what you have and the fiber of what the yarn is that the designer used. But we want to look for yarns that have a 90% match or higher. You can use the fillers to exclude fibers that you're allergic to. The truth is, you're probably going to need to swatch the yarn, especially if it's a wearable like a garment. If it's something like a shawl, it's not that big of a deal to swatch, but swatching does come vital when it comes to yarn chicken. And I know you don't want to hear that, but if you're using too much of your yarn and making it too big, you're not going to have enough yarn to complete it. And if you're not using enough yarn, like say your stitches are too small, then it could be too small for you, or it's not going to be as big as the original design. So you're not going to have that same gauge range as the designer's does. And I do want to say this little caveat about swatching also, and this is something that you may or may not heard before, but when you swatch, you want to make a swatch that's big enough to get accurate measurements from. So you typically want to have a 4 to 6 inch swatch, and there's lots of resources out there on swatching, and you want to take that measurement from the very center of that swatch, because if you get too close to the edge or your swatch is not big enough, then those stitches are going to get distorted because of those edge stitches, and you're not going to get an accurate reading, and that matters. It matters. Also, you want to swatch with whatever crochet hook or whatever knitting needle that you're going to be making the completed project in. Because the truth of it is, your gauge is going to vary versus a wood needle or crochet hook versus a metal. Metal tends to be a little bit slipper. And so it does kind of give you a little bit looser gauge, where something like bamboo is going to hold onto your yarn for dear life, and you may feel that aggression and your stitches may be a little bit tighter. So if you're swatching and you're only like a stitch or two off and you go up and down and you just can't get it just right, we're going to have a Goldilocks moment, and we're just going to go and do something as easy as using a different material, needle, or crochet hook, and then swatch again and see what your results are then, because that might get you where you need to be. I just realized I'm talking with my hands a lot, and I'm sorry if that's distracting. I don't know why I'm doing that today. But I do want to talk about some safety practices, because let me just tell you, I started to watch The Terminator the other night for some strange reason, and it made me think about this, and I was like, I need to put that in my video. But we have to, keep our eyes out for AI and fake scammy things. We can't let computers and technology steal our joy of crafting, because it will. In a heartbeat, it will do it to you. Often, and lately, I would say every day and every waking minute of opening any social media platform, you're going to be faced with these really cute, amazing makes, and you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I want to make that cute cat and dog. And then you start looking at it and you realize something looks a little odd about it. Or maybe you see this really cute pattern and you follow the little rabbit hole to where it's being sold and you buy it and you open it up and you're like, where's the rest of the directions? This is not working out. I'm looking at you, Mary pattern that's in the floor. And then that is when you realize you have been scammed by the spammity spammer. And we don't like that. Perfect pattern photos on Pinterest. The stitches often look a little blurry like noodles, or the person has 6 fingers. That's obvious indicators that it is going to be AI. However, modern technology is getting better and better day by day, and those fake patterns are looking even more realistic every single day. Another little thing that I want to say that a lot of people don't realize is when you look at a lot of these Facebook groups and these Facebook page, I call it fake book pages, but that's true. That's what it is. It's a fake book page. You see all these comments under there and you're like, wow, a lot of people like this stuff. Those are usually paid for bots and not even real people. If you look at something and it looks a little odd and all of a sudden you only have comments that are giving positive radiant reviews, and then you look at the comment number and those two numbers do not match up, that's an indicator that they've deleted all the people who's been calling them out for their spammity spam behavior and the fakeness. So always keep an eye on those things, because I hate when people get scammed and spammed. It just really hurts my heart that that is happening to many of you out there. And one of my secret weapons to win that war is to use Ravelry. And I understand I use Ravelry for a lot of things, and many of you do not like to use Ravelry. I get that. But Ravelry is kind of like a cheat sheet for me. I can go into the projects tab, and if 500 people have favored it, but 0 people have actually finished it, then that's going to be a red flag for me. If I look at the projects and the projects don't match up to what the designer's finished object looks like, that's going to be a red flag for me. Read the comments. Nowadays, information is so easily entangled with one another. You can look at a pattern that you might see and just type in the designer in Google and let the AI see, or even do searches and see if other people have negative reviews about it. And then that can kind of help prevent a lot of the spammers from attacking you. So now I want to talk about how to get those yarns into actual patterns. And we're going to do that by using a Ravelry. We're going to move over to the desk so I can show you how to do that. So one of the vital things that we have to use is, so one of the tools that we have that can help us really pair our yarns to our patterns is Ravelry. And I understand not everyone likes to use it, but it is such a great resource for this if you utilize its different functions. And I want to go over those today. There is 3 separate videos on my channel about how to use Ravelry, but I am going to show you the basics in this video because I want this to be that video that you can go back to and really find information to help you on your journey. So when you go to Ravelry, you have a section that has your main profile, and you get to that by clicking the top little, on the right hand side, little avatar of you or whatever photo you have. And then you can see all of your information. And this is where you can see how many projects that you have, how many yarns that you have stashed, how many projects and patterns that you have queued. And you can even see if you're doing hand spun. There's a favorite section, there's a library section, there's a lot of sections, and we're going to go over them. We're going to talk first about the library. Now, the library is what keeps up with all your patterns for you. And the ones that you get through Ravelry, it is going to keep your access here to them. There is a little discrepancy though, I think, on some information. If a pattern is free for a short period of time and you save that to your library, you may not get full access to that later on. That's why I always suggest, if there's a pattern for free that you see and you save it to your library, go ahead and download that pattern and put that somewhere that you can reference it later. There's one of the videos on my channel where I talk about how I keep up with my patterns, and I'll link that right here and in the video. But I use a binder and a thumb drive system and even external hard drive, and it is like essential for keeping up with everything. And also it can keep up with all the patterns that you have via books and magazines. So you can go into a certain book. Let's say I'm going to go do advanced search and I'm going to type in Empkins. Because someone asked me about this little guy, this little mushroom that's on my desk, and I told him it was the Empkins book. So you can see where it says Crochet Empkins, and you can see right here I can add that to my library because I already own that book, and now that it shows it's in my library. So when I'm picking up patterns and I go to search for patterns via the pattern search tool, I can click that I want to look for patterns that are in my library, and it's going to be able to pull that book. When I click on it, I can't get access to the pattern itself. It's just going to like let me search and see that I have options to have access to that. But this really helps me stay organized because sometimes I have a lot of books and magazines and I do not know what's all in them. But this way I can search if I want to make something that I own where I don't have to buy another pattern, and it'll let me know without having to go actually physically look through all my books and flip through all the magazines to see if I own it. Go back to the profile page again. Your library is also going to have a feature where you can see how many patterns that you have, how many books that you have, how many magazines, etc. They'll show you what you recently added, and then there's a purchase tab so you can actually click on and see all the ones that you purchased and when you actually purchased them, and that can be kind of fun to see if you've actually made the things that you bought. And then if you ever send any gifts, pattern gifts, you're going to be able to see those here of all the ones that you've sent to other people. And then you can even search through your own patterns in your library via this little handy dandy tool, and you can export that data if you want to have it somewhere on paper from that section as well. Under the Ravelry downloads, you see where it says 153 updates available. If you click on that, it's going to pull up all the patterns that have updates, and you can go through if you're wanting to make something and do an update. This might be where the designer simplified the language, or maybe there was an errata, a correction that they needed to make to the pattern, and this is where that's going to show up for you, and you just click on it and it automatically updates to the new version of that pattern. A lot of times they will have updates as designers go back and maybe they learn something in their own journey and they can simplify that pattern to make it even easier to understand for someone else. So if you pull up a pattern like this, I think I had yarn attached to that. It's fine, I'll figure it out. So you can pull up a pattern like this and say I want to add that to my queue like a hat. I can click add to queue right here in the top right corner, and then it'll pop up this and it'll have a place for you. If it's a paid for pattern, you can click the little box and it'll be put into your wish list, and maybe somebody will come along and buy that for you. And if you already have yarn that you know you want to use with it, you can click the stash button right here and you can pull up for yarn that it'll work. So it automatically filters to the pattern weight. So this pattern utilizes DK weight yarn, and in here I was going to use the Debbie Bliss Blue Lace Luster DK. So let's go ahead and set that up before I get this. I'm going to edit, and then I want to use stash yarn. I'm going to type in Debbie, and it's going to go through all my DK weight yarn, and it's going to find the yarn that I have enough possible yardage for, and I'm going to click use. And so now that yarn, save this. Now when I look at this pattern in my Ravelry queue, it shows me I'll use the Debbie Bliss Blue Faced Luster DK yarn, which I have 591 yards of. And when I get ready to start this project, I just click start the project and it automatically makes the project page for us, which is super amazing and takes some time out of the little nitty bitty stuff if you like to track your projects on Ravelry. Now, another quick thing to talk about is our favorites. Favorites are different than your queued, and they're different from your library. Favorites are something where if I'm going through patterns and I want to find a couple of, say, sock patterns that I want to utilize in a video, I might create a favorites tab. What I like to make favorites tab for also, if I see a pattern that has a really cool edging on it, I'll save that into my mods and edges. And that way, if I'm making another shawl down the road and I don't like the edge, I can reference back to that little favorites folder and I can see other edges. And if I already own the pattern, I can just go pull it up and put that pattern's edge on whatever I'm making. I also like to keep, I think I made a video or I did a Make It Monday post a long time ago where I was talking about things that are really good to use to sell or to create to sell at markets, like farmers markets. And so I actually have a market makes tab on my Ravelry page. If you're someone who does farmers markets, you're more than welcome to find me on Ravelry. I'm at yarning with a number 4, a smile. And you can go to my favorites and you can see that I have 56 patterns in there of fun things that will use up scraps and that you could sell at markets. I do keep one that has favorite designers. Sometimes my favorite designers will come out with new designs and maybe I don't have anything queued for them, but I want to see what they have made recently that maybe I've missed, and I can click on that and I can kind of keep up with what they're creating and see if there's inspiration for me of something I want to make. And then I have a wish list because wish lists are fun, and that's where those patterns that we don't own yet, but we want to own, we can click on. And if someone is like, hey, I know it's Kim's birthday, I'm going to go on Ravelry and I'm going to buy her a pattern, you would click on my wish list and it shows you all the patterns that I want to make. Now, if someone goes to buy you a pattern and you already own it, Ravelry's going to have a pop-up that pops up that says, hey, hold on, they actually already own this. And then that way you can choose a different pattern for them. Now, I'm all about some real life applications, so I went and grabbed some yarn for us. We have this mystery skein. I actually know what this is, but we're going to pretend like this is a mystery skein. And we figured out our wraps per inch. We figured out that it's a number 6, super bulky, and we think it's acrylic. We're not really sure. One of the things that you can do to kind of help solve this mystery for you is a burn test. So it comes with a little bit of caution though, because you're going to be using fire. So you want to do this in a place and on something that's obviously not going to catch fire and that you have access to water so you can put out said little fire. You're going to take a very small piece of your yarn and you're going to hold it over something safe and you're going to carefully burn just the end. What happened next will tell you a lot. If it smells like burning hair, that's going to be an animal fiber. You'll know. It's like your wool, your alpacas, or anything that has a protein base component. If it smells like burning paper or leaves, that's going to be a plant fiber. So you think your cottons, your linens, or your bamboos. And if it melts or beads up, then that's a sure indicator that you have a synthetic fiber. So it's going to be acrylic or polyester. And then most important about this step is to do it safely and in an area where you have access to water. And if you are someone who's younger who's watching this video, make sure you have your parents' permission before you go grab a lighter and start burning your yarn. It's not something that you're going to probably have to do all the time, but it's just kind of a little tool that you can use at the last resort if you have no idea what the fiber is and you want to make sure that you're going to be using something for the right kind of project so you don't wind up making in a pot holder with acrylic and then having it melt on you and possibly burn you. So back to our mystery yarn. We know it's a bulky. We even know how many yards we have. And if you already know what kind of yarn this is, let me know down below if you are a secret mystery yarn agent and what you think the right yarn is. So now we're going to find a project for it. So we're going to go into patterns and we're going to go to the advanced search feature. And we're going to go over here on the side. This is going to be our cheat sheet to narrow it down to find the perfect pattern for this kind of yarn. Now there's something else that we need to consider. We want to think about the pattern busyness and the yarn busyness because those are going to be very important into finding the perfect match. And what I mean by that is there's a couple different types of yarn dyes that you will see. Okay, before we move on, we do want to cover one little thing. And remember me talking about how you're going to see this yarn later in the video? This is where. So there is different dye styles out there that is used on our yarn. And before we move on, we need to talk about that and how it can make or break your project. And it really does matter in your overall finished object. Because not all color dye styles behave the same with stitches that we make. So a couple of these is something like this mystery yarn. It's a solid yarn. And it's exactly what it sounds like. One consistent color all the way through. This is your best friend for things like cables, textures, lace, anything with high stitch detail. This is going to be your friend and your go-to because nothing is going to be competing with the yarn itself. Everything's going to show. So if you have a super busy pattern, think super simple yarn. And don't worry, I think I added that in the cheat sheet as well. Next, we're going to have your tonal. So tonals are one color, but with slight variation or shade throughout the yarn. So you might have this deeper red in some sections, and then it kind of goes to a little bit lighter and even a soft pink in the other. This is going to give you depth, and it's going to give your project interest, and it's going to make it have a little bit of a variation to it. It still lets your stitches shine, but it's kind of like a safety middle ground between this and something like this. And this is one of my favorite dye styles to use, and that is a speckled yarn. And that is because it gives you so many options and it adds so much interest. This has pops of color scattered throughout, like fun confetti. And one of my favorite examples of this is this octopus that I made. The speckled yarn really just shines and it just gives the piece itself a lot of whimsy and it gives it a lot of color and a lot of joy. But that is a great speckle yarn. And then we have things like this. This is a self-striping dye style. So you're going to have long runs of color and it's going to allow the color to stripe as you create your project. It's a lot of fun for socks, hats, and mittens. But when you go bigger rows, the width or the height of that color is going to vary and get smaller and smaller. So always keep that in your mind when you're working with self-striping yarns. And then you have something like this, which is kind of a variegated yarn. It's just your hodgepodge of colors. And there's different kind of variegated yarns. There's some of them that have a lot of colors and shorter runs of that color, and then some of them have super long runs of the color. And depending on what kind of variegated yarn you use, you can actually utilize that to really make cool eye-catching detail in some of your projects. We're not going to cover that today because honestly my throat's getting tired and this video is already going to be long enough. But those are some different yarn attributes, I guess, or distinctions that you should kind of consider when you're looking for patterns. Hello, it's late evening editing me, and I was getting this video together, and there is a couple of things that I want to mention that I want to make sure I include in this video for you. And that's just two terms that often get used interchangeably, but they're actually two different things. And that is ombres and gradients. Ombre is typically one single color that shifts from a light to a dark, or even a dark to light. And in this case, this soft, very pale yellow moving into this darker yellow. Gradient, on the other hand, is a slow fade or project showing color transition. So a gradient is a little broader and it's got more shifts to it. It's very, very noticeable. And it's often between two completely different colors. You may see in this one, the orange turned to green, the green turned to brown, versus the ombre of this slow change in color. The easiest way to remember this is ombre, same color, different shades, and gradient, color shift. The important thing to think about a true gradient yarn is that when you're working for it, you kind of need to know if the color change is very abrupt or if it's more gradual, because it can kind of do weird things with your project if it's somewhere right here and then there's just abrupt color change. And that's typically where I would cut the yarn and buy maybe one or two skeins at the beginning so I can kind of make that shift towards the back or on the end. But it's just a personal preference. In case you're wondering, this is some Dawn Roving Yarns. This is one of their gradients. And this is Oktoberfest. And this is Green Dragon Yarns in the yellow gradient. I didn't want to leave those out because I wanted to make sure you're confident in the different dye techniques that are out there, because those make you stronger and more confident when you choose a pattern for those. And it also can make the pattern that you choose like truly sing in all of its glory. Now back to this guy. So we have this solid, and it's, again, is going to be great for everything. And we know it is a number 6 bulky weight yarn. If you notice, even Ravelry keeps Aran and worsted separated. If you're trying to find a pattern, don't let that like think, oh my goodness, I can only look at Aran. You can look in Aran and worsted weight. You're probably going to be okay. But we know this is going to be a super bulky weight yarn. And we also know that this is going to be around, I think, 100 yards. So I'm going to click the top one, which is 0 to 150. Now, you can also see that you can use colors used. So I only have the one shade of purple of mystery yarn. I know it's kind of got acrylic in there, so I'm just going to click on the number 1, which narrows this down to 1,502 options. Okay, now we're getting to somewhere that's better than 6,000 options. I mean, right? We want to avoid decision fatigue. And so I'm looking and I'm thinking, I want to use as much of this as possible. So just by experience, that I know a hat would be a really good use for this. So I'm going to go over here to the categories. Speaking of these, you can go into this jump filters right here, and you can look at them this way if you prefer list. You can also click these little boxes right here and move these around and put them in an order that you are used to when you're searching patterns. I love that feature. And you can even do some certain searches, and you can save your search so you can come back to it later. But I know I want to make, I think, a hat with this, which would be considered an accessory. So Ravelry sorts by clothing, accessories, medical, home, toys, hobbies, pets, and components. Components would be like an edging or a motif. So I want to make an accessory. Now we are down to 1,214. And so I'm looking at the accessories, and you can click on that, I don't know if you saw, and you have another pop out that pops out. And this is going to let you really fine tune that even more. So it has bags, belts, feet, hands. I want to make a hat. So now we're down to 581 options. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, friends. When you click on that, another pop out pops out, and it gives us all kind of different options of hats. I just want a good old basic beanie. So I'm going to find a beanie or torque for all you Canadian friends out there. I have a Canadian friend who was like, no, we call those torques. You should call it a torque. We call it beanies. So that takes it down to 463 options. We have come a long way. We've like almost half our decision making already, and it's been like a minute. And so now we can kind of go through here and see some ideas. There's an option up here towards the top, sort by. You can sort by new to Ravelry, hot right now, random order, most popular, most queued. We're just going to leave it on hot right now. But this is where the fun and all of your time you spent inventory your yarns into Ravelry, if that's what you did, comes in play. And it's going to deliver that final blow that's going to make you victorious. And that is scrolling down till you see availability. So you have an option to click on free, which will narrow it down to 228 projects just to choose from. Or we can go to one in my library, things that I already have owned. There's one option. Let's see what that is. So that would mean that I already own the pattern to this twirl beanie. I actually bought that to use for Katya yarn, but I haven't made it yet. We're going to go back, and I'm actually just going to scroll up here and remove the library option. Now I'm going to go back to that same section, and I want to see as far as free patterns. If I had it in my queue, if I had a pattern in my queue that would work for this, that option would also pop up, but I don't have one queued that would work for this. So I'm going to click on free, and now I have all these free hats to choose from, and we have a lot of options. You can even scroll back up and you can choose if you want to see crochet or knitting. Currently I have it set to crochet, but if I clicked on knitting, it's going to give me 869 more options to choose from. However, I can see that in my library, I already have 4 that I own. So I can look at my library and see what I already own in knitting and in crochet, and it's going to give me a lot more options to choose from. But that is how we can really pair yarn to our patterns. Again, I have 3 different videos on the channel, Ravelry 101, that's going to carry you even more through that process. So I'm going to link those up above and down below for you to check out. And I hope this kind of helps you get started on your journey. There's going to be more videos like this to come, so make sure you're subscribed so you do not miss those. So it's editing me again. As I was putting the last finishing touches on this video, it feels like I've been editing this video all day long. I realized there's one more thing I want to leave you with, and I want to reference my notes because I wrote them down. Because we covered a lot in this video, and I hope you really enjoyed it. I really tried to pack it full of information. I don't want you feeling overwhelmed. I want you feeling confident. Confidence is that's my goal here. I want you walking away with a printable and information that you can sit down with yarns that you have in your stash and think, okay, I can look at this yarn and I can find the perfect pattern for it because I know what to look for in the yarn. And I don't want that to be a second guessing for you. So first we're going to look at our yarn weight, and if you don't know, you can use your wraps per inch to get it in the right category because that's going to help you. Second, you want to look at the fiber. Ask yourself, what does it need to do? What does this piece need to function as? You also want to ask yourself, does it need to have structure? Can it be very limp? Does it need to have flow like a shawl? Just a couple of things to ask. Third, did you check your yardage and make sure you actually have enough yarn to finish the project? So we're not playing yarn chicken anymore. I hate yarn chicken. Fourth, look at your color and your dye style. Is it too busy? Is it simple? Is it going to overpower the pattern, or is it just going to be just right? And remember, let the yarn be the star or the pattern. They can't compete. One of them has to sing so the other can be the supporting actress. And finally, pair it with intention. I think that's a key to keeping from having a lot of WIPs. I've had a lot of projects over the years, but I think I've only actually frogged under 10 projects. And that's really not that bad. One of them was a sweater, which was working fine. I just didn't want to make it. I had tried to do the October fest yarn in a shawl, and it was one of those examples of where the pattern was just too busy, the yarn was just too busy, and it was just competing with each other. And it was something where I was trying to make something just to make something to fit in a knit along. And I think we've got to be more intentional than that. I know I do. And so I no longer want to do that, and I don't want to have to frog that and rewind that. So whether you're starting with yarn or starting with a pattern, you now have the tools to make the decisions that you need to make with confidence, and we're no longer just organizing our yarn and putting it on one shelf and putting it in a tote. We're actually going to be utilizing it, and we're going to be creating things that we love. So this was a very, very beefy episode, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to feel empowered. Utilize those 3 videos I have on the channel for Ravelry 101. And if you have any questions beyond that, you can always get a hold of me through comments or through email. And I've already created some threads in our Discord group where you can see the different kind of like garments and hats and shawls. And that's a great place to ask your pairing yarn and pattern questions. You can share photos and we can help you kind of make decisions if that's going to be a great choice. I don't want you just to have a stash. I want you to know and love your stash and your yarns. And I want you to feel empowered to choose the yarn that's going to work best for the pattern or the pattern that's going to be best for the yarn that you have on hand. We're on a journey to work through our yarns, and this is a journey that we're taking together. So you're not alone in this endeavor. And that's why I'm always here to answer questions for you. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Let me know down below what you found very interesting, or maybe what you learned in today's video, or what you would like to see more information on, and I will consider that for a video to come. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Are you ready to go in and get something to eat? Yeah, me too.